Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy HP, and you're listening to the first ever episode for Unsportsmanlike Conduct. This podcast is going to cover football, my beloved New York Giants, and some baseball and basketball from time to time, and any other current events that are impacting our sports world. Also, to all my listeners, if you have a favorite team or you have a favorite athlete that you want me to talk about, please drop those suggestions, and I'll be more than happy to include them on my podcast episodes. I want this podcast to be as engaging as it possibly can, so please reach out to me by following my Instagram page. That's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. Again, that's _unsportsmanlike_conduct. It's very important that you guys do follow this page because I'll also be dropping my links to the podcast episodes on that Instagram page, and also we'll be posting throughout the week, right? So this allows you guys to get my thoughts and opinions on what's going on in our sports world throughout the week, in addition to me releasing my podcast episode. So please follow that page as you kind of get a little bit of everything by doing so. So I'll give a brief introduction of who I am. My name's HP. I'm 25 years old. I currently work in financial services, and I was born and raised in the inner city of Queens, East Elmhurst, New York, and then as of a couple of years ago, my family and I moved out to Long Island. And, over the last 10 to 15 years, I became a huge sports fanatic. I followed baseball, basketball, and then mostly football, and I sort of gravitated towards the sport of football and became a passionate New York Giants fan, although I know as of the last couple of years, there hasn't been much to root for. But nevertheless, I am a New York City kid, and, I just love the New York Giants, and that's why I wanted to start this podcast, to share my thoughts and opinions and my insights on what I'm seeing on the football field when I do watch the New York Giants, and then just any other team across the NFL. So I actually wanted to take this podcast to talk about some of the free agency moves that the New York Giants have made, which includes a lot of the blockbuster moves. And, I understand that a lot of New York Giants fans at this moment are not happy with David Gettleman, our general manager. I think a lot of people have lost trust in management, and they're just confused and are just unsure of what the direction of this team is and where we're going. I even had a buddy of mine suggest that we may be the Cleveland Browns of the NFL, right, where we may be the most crappiest team in the NFL, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think we have a good plan, and I'm here to explain why. So I'd like to actually start off with the Olivier Vernon trade to the Cleveland Browns for right guard Kevin Zeitler. I'm in love with this trade. I thought this was such a great trade, a very methodical trade by David Gettleman. You have to give David Gettleman a lot of credit because ever since he came to the New York Giants, he's addressed a very glaring need, which was the offensive line, right? He signed Nate Soldier last offseason. And now he's our left tackle. We drafted Will Hernandez at left guard. We just re-signed Spencer Pulley a couple of weeks ago, who's a pretty decent center, right? I mean, he gets the job done. And now we got a all-pro, Pro Bowler stud in Kevin Zeitler. This guy has been killing it for years. I'm just such a big fan of this trade, and I'm going to explain why. Excuse me. Olivier Vernon got paid a crap ton of money, and he underperformed, right? I mean, he was always injured, and then even when he was on the field, he was always playing with nagging injuries. I mean, how many times have we read articles week in and week out that, Olivier Vernon didn't participate in practice, or that, he's probable or questionable for, this Sunday, right? I mean, now that's all over, right? I mean, he always fell off the screen. I watched every single Giants game, right, over the last couple of years. He was a non-high-impact player. We paid him a lot of money to be an impactful player. My expectation when we signed him was that he'd get us 10 to 15 sacks a year, and he didn't. The first year he was with us, he got us 8.5 sacks. The second year he got us, I believe it was 6.5, and then this past year he got us 7.5 sacks. That's very underwhelming. And look, I think he's going to do some great things for the Browns, but let's be honest, he's a grade B defensive end. Right, he's not a superstar player. He's a grade B player, and we traded him for a grade A stud in Kevin Zeitler. So now our offensive line is looking like this: Nate Soldier at left tackle, Will Hernandez at left guard, Spencer Pulley at center, and then Kevin Zeitler at right guard. So we're a decent right tackle away from having a solidified offensive line. And let's be honest, right? In the second half of last season, our offense got better. Our offensive line was holding up, right? Our running game got even better. I mean, Saquon ended with 1,300 rushing yards. I mean, that's insane, right? I mean, granted, that may be more of Saquon than the offensive line, but I mean, you have to still have a decent offensive line to be able to rush for 1,300 yards. Right? Eli Manning was standing tall and tight in the pocket. He was letting that ball zip. A lot of people think, Eli Manning can't throw anymore, but he was throwing the ball well. When he had time and he was sitting strong and tall in that pocket, he was letting that ball fire, and that ball came out pretty well. So, I think this coming season, now that we're continually making improvements to our offensive line, I think Eli's going to have a pretty decent year. It might be one of his better years compared to maybe the last 3 years or so. And look, we have a lot of draft picks, so I think we'll be able to find a pretty good right tackle in this year's draft. I mean, hopefully we can find that talent, right? And I'm pretty excited to see what the future holds for our offensive line, given this trade for Olivier Vernon for Kevin Zeitler. The next move I'd like to talk about is that big blockbuster trade, the trade that shook up the whole world, that have broke New York Giants fans' hearts, including myself. Including myself. And I think this is the trade where obviously people are like, you know what, screw Gettleman. Gettleman needs to be fired. The Giants don't know what they're doing anymore. And this was the big trade that everyone, this is where we're like, what the hell are we doing? Don't we want to win? But you know what, I'm going to tell you now, I think that trade was a pretty good trade, and we got pretty good value for it. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with it, but just hear me out. We ended up losing Landon Collins in free agency, right? We didn't re-sign him. But in place of Landon Collins, we ended up getting Jabril Peppers, who is a stud safety. He's actually a little bit better than Landon Collins in coverage. And I think he's about 22, 23 years young. Right? I mean, he's younger than me. I'm 25, and I can barely get my lazy ass on a treadmill. Okay? So, this guy is a stud. And I was so happy when I found out that he was part of this trade. This guy's going to do big things for the New York Giants. This guy is a true center fielder. He can roam all over the field, which Landon Collins couldn't. Landon Collins was the most effective in the box, and that's why almost on all of our plays, Landon Collins was always in the box. And for my viewers out there who don't know, I guess the football technical terms, the box is essentially the space between your defensive linemen and your linebackers. And so the reason why Landon Collins was always so close to there, and usually this was probably in nickel packages, was because he was a great tackler. He was a strong, fast, and great tackler. But he was horrible in coverage. Right? I hate the fact that he would get burned by our slot receivers and even tight ends. And look, I'm going to be honest, a DB, a defensive back, should not be getting burned by a tight end. Okay? Your DB should be faster than your tight end. That's inexcusable. You know what I mean? The only person that should be faster the only person that shouldn't be able to cover the tight ends adequately are your linebackers. Okay? Those are the only guys where I'm okay with. If my linebacker gets burned, if Alec Ogletree gets burned by a tight end, I'm okay with that, because I expect a tight end to be faster than Alec Ogletree. But I don't expect a tight end to be faster than Landon Collins. And so that was the big issue. And Jabril Peppers is a great player. He just came off a great sophomore year, and I can't wait to see what James Betcher, our defensive coordinator, is going to do with him. Because you can get really creative with the guy like that. It was a little hard to get creative with Landon Collins because he wasn't that good in coverage. Right? That 2 years ago when he had those 6 to 7 interceptions, those interceptions were fluke interceptions. I saw all those interceptions. I saw all those games, folks. Interceptions are a very misleading stat because you need to be in the right place at the right time. And usually for an interception, when you're in the right place at the right time, it's because it's all on the quarterback, right? It's because the quarterback missed a throw or underthrew it or overthrew it, right? That doesn't make you a good defensive back if you catch that. Look, and a buddy of mine, shout out to Matthew McCurdy. The other night I was having a drinks with him, and I was giving him the same spiel. I was giving him the same argument, and he asked me straight up. He's like, "So you're telling me you'd rather have Landon Collins over Jabril Peppers right now?" And I told him, honestly, no. If we were able to keep Landon Collins, I would have been happy. I would pick Landon Collins from just the overall player experience and just veteran standpoint. I would pick Landon Collins over Jabril Peppers. But I'm here to tell you that Jabril Peppers is a stud and he can ball out, okay? And he's so young. He's only been in the league for 2 years. So think about it. We're about to get Jabril Peppers as he enters his prime. So we're going to get a prime Jabril Peppers. And I'm very, very excited about this. Secondly, we got a third-round pick in that trade. So in addition to Jabril Peppers, we end up getting the Browns' third-round pick. Guys, we did not have a third-round pick entering this draft. Okay, we had a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and then we ended up losing a third-round pick because, and I could be incorrect here, but so the NFL does this thing where they have this supplementary draft after the real NFL draft, and the Giants ended up having a pick in that draft. We ended up picking a cornerback in that draft, and because of that, they take away a draft pick in the following year's draft. So we ended up not. That's the reason why we didn't have a third-round pick this year. And again, I could be wrong. So, I'll do some more research on that after this episode, and I'll confirm on my next podcast episode on whether I was, wrong or right on that. But so we ended up not having a third-round pick, and that concerned me heading into the NFL draft because I think you get the best talent from rounds 1 through 4. So for me, it made me a little uncomfortable. I'm like, okay, well, we pick at number 1. We pick in round 1 and in round 2, but then we don't pick in round 3. Right? So then that means we're letting we're letting more than 32 picks pass from round 2 until we hit round 4. So I was a little concerned by that. So now we have a third-round pick, which allows us to adequately draft a full 7 rounds. Right, just like as it's sort of like, we're back in business, right? Business as usual. So that's why I was happy about that third-round pick. And then lastly and most importantly, my favorite part about this trade was the first-round pick, which is the 17th pick of the draft. The Browns gave us pick number 17. The reason why I'm so happy about this pick, the reason why I'm so happy about obtaining this pick in the trade is because now this gives us so much flexibility in the draft. Let's just say, for argument's sake, we don't want to go quarterback in round 1, which I don't think we should, and I'll discuss that in a later episode. Now we can build a team with all this draft capital, right? So at number 6, we can get an edge rusher. We're picking number 6 this year. We can get an edge rusher. Then 11 picks later, which is pick 17, we can get a defensive back because I think right now we're pretty slim on cornerbacks. We can pick a defensive back or we can get another receiver. I am so high on A.J. Brown, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss. I am super high on him. I think he's going to be an immediate impact player, and I think he can line up anywhere on the line of scrimmage. Right? I don't know. I think if we can get him at pick 17 and then probably Montez Sweat at pick number 6, those are cornerstone players that we probably that'll have an immediate and high impact for the next 5 years. And then at number 2, 3, and then 4 and onwards, it gives us a lot of flexibility given that we have 2 picks in the first round. Guys, you got to understand, right? We get to pick more frequently than other teams. So between pick 6 and 17, 11 teams will pick. Then between pick 17 and then the second round pick, less than 32 teams will pick, right? So we end up going 2 straight rounds. We end up picking 3 times before a full 32 teams can pick. And that's why I think that, this Odell Beckham trade, while it was a shell shock to all of us, the results were positive. I think at the end of the day, it was a fair trade. I don't think one team necessarily won the trade. However, I do think it was a fair trade. And it's funny because I ended up reading a post on Instagram where the Cleveland Browns came out saying that they believe they swindled the Giants because they think that there's only 15, top 15 players that are worth it that should go in the first round. So they felt comfortable letting go their first round pick. And that's, and there's more on that, right? We have to just see how everything pans out. And so next, let's get into that Golden Tate signing. It was a very interesting signing. I thought that was a very impulsive move by David Gettleman, given that we had just given away Odell Beckham Jr., our star receiver. I think that David Gettleman decided to sign Golden Tate because I think it was like, hey, let me give my fans a signing, a player that everyone recognizes, right? Because all football fans know who Golden Tate is, right? We're well aware of who he is. He started with the Seahawks. He was with the Seahawks for a couple of years, then did some great things with the Lions. Then got traded to the Eagles. Like, everyone's aware of Golden Tate and his abilities and his skills. And he's had a pretty good career so far, right? So I think that's why he decided to sign him. But I'm not too crazy about this signing. He's going to be 31 years old when he's going to be playing this year. And then, in football years, obviously, and everyone knows this, right? It's almost in every sport. When you hit 30 years old, that's when you sort of begin to regress. And, I'm just, like, given that he's 31 years old and the contract that we gave him, so I have the numbers in front of me. His deal's worth $37.5 million over 4 years with $23 million guaranteed. So, I mean, that's essentially more than half. More than half of his contract is a guaranteed, and I'm just not crazy about that. Look, he's a great player. I think he's very quick off the line, which is why he was so effective, is because he had such a great jump once the snap was called, which allowed him to get open very quickly. And I think his his agility and his quickness allowed him to get those yards after the catch, which he's so famously known for. But again, I think at 31 years old, I think this is where we'll see him regress. And that's why I'm just not crazy about this signing against the money that we've given him. And again, I just think that this was a very impulsive signing from David Gettleman, sort of throwing the Giants fans a bone for giving up Odell Beckham Jr. And, newsflash, we already have a Golden Tate. That's Sterling Shepard, okay? Golden Tate's 31 years old. Sterling Shepard is 26 years old. Sterling Shepard is a very similar player to the way Golden Tate is. It's similar in nature, similar in size. Obviously there's going to be some differences here or there, but they're essentially in nature the same player. So I still don't really get this signing, because when we lost Beckham, we lost a big play wide receiver. We lost a wide receiver that can go down and stretch the field. That's what we needed. At least sign a burner, right? I mean, at least, like, if they would have signed Deshaun Jackson, who I believe might be around the same age, at least Deshaun Jackson can stretch the field. At least Deshaun Jackson can run a fly route, because he still had a pretty decent year last year, Deshaun Jackson. I mean, there were just other options that I thought were better given what we needed for our offense. Right? I like Dante Moncrief. The Steelers jumped on him. The Steelers jumped on Dante Moncrief. Dante Moncrief hasn't had a great season yet, but also you have to understand he started his career with the Colts, and there were some issues there at quarterback, right? I mean, Andrew Luck wasn't always healthy. Then he went to Jacksonville Jaguars, and right, because Blake Bortles was really gonna elevate Dante Moncrief's career. We all know how that ended up, right? They didn't even make the playoffs, and Blake Bortles is no longer even on the Jacksonville Jaguars as their quarterback. So there are just other options, right? Randall Cobb. Look how cheap the Dallas Cowboys got Randall Cobb for. Chris Conley, who I was pretty high on in free agency, right? Now he's on the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I like Chris Conley because Chris Conley, his stats aren't going to show it, but he was effective when he played. Right, when Tyreek Hill was injured here or there, when Sammy Watkins was injured here or there, when he played and his number got called, he made plays. He was pretty effective when he was given the chance, and that would have been a low risk, low reward, high reward contract, because he would have been cheap, because Chris Conley didn't have stats or enough play time to even warrant a big contract. So, there were just other options that I thought were more better and just made more sense to me rather than Golden Tate giving him $23 million in guarantee. But, again, hopefully they have a plan, right? Hopefully they didn't blindly just, give him this contract and sign him without a game plan heading into the season. And now I want to end this podcast by talking about who I think are the biggest winners and the biggest losers for free agency. So let's start off with the Green Bay Packers. Definitely in the winners column. They made some very key improvements on defense. They signed linebackers Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith. Two pretty good linebackers that are going to make immediate impacts and, definitely going to bolster that front seven, which struggled last year. The defense overall for the Packers was pretty bad, and especially the run defense. So having those two linebackers in there definitely going to improve that. Also, in addition to those linebackers, the signing of Adrian Amos, who was previously a safety for the Chicago Bears. Adrian Amos is a pretty good safety, and that's definitely going to improve their secondary. And by improving both the front seven and the secondary, you have a little bit of a freedom in the coming draft time to draft best player available rather than at position level needs. Let's talk about another winner, the Oakland Raiders trading a 3rd and a 5th round draft pick for Antonio Brown. Anytime you can trade mid-round picks for superstar all-time talent, you've won the trade. Antonio Brown's a top 3 receiver. We all know what he's capable of doing. And in addition to that trade, they also signed Tyreek Williams, who's a burner. And he did some pretty good things for the Los Angeles Chargers. So I think with those 2 receivers, Derek Carr is going to have a bounce-back season. It's going to elevate his level of play. And this team's going to be able to not only move the ball down quickly, but definitely effectively because these 2 receivers can stretch the field. In addition to getting these 2 receivers, they also signed a pretty good offensive tackle in Trent Brown. He was with the New England Patriots previously, and I think this definitely is a big improvement to the offensive line, which is well needed because Derek Carr got sacked about 51 times last season, which is a lot of times to get sacked. So, the offensive line still needs work, but I think they have more than enough picks to definitely address that in the draft. Let's talk about the losers now. The Baltimore Ravens losing 3 key linebackers, Terrell Suggs, Zadarius Smith, and C.J. Mosley. Anytime you can lose 3 key players in your defense, especially that are part of your front seven, it's going to put a lot of pressure on their secondary for making even more plays than they're used to already doing. Also, I'm not really sure why they signed Earl Thomas when they already had Eric Weddle. They released Eric Weddle, signed Earl Thomas, but Earl Thomas, he's coming off a pretty grueling injury, so I'm not sure why they made that transaction. It could have been impulsive, so we'll see how that one turns out. Also, they didn't get Lamar Jackson any receivers. No passing help whatsoever. We saw the horrible pass from a passing standpoint. We saw how horrible Lamar Jackson played. And I think this is a recipe for a disaster. I don't think he's going to get any better in the sophomore year unless they get him some talent to throw to. And then one more loser in the free agency. The Kansas City Chiefs, they made no real key improvements to make that defensive unit better. There were no improvements. I love the signing of Tyrann Mathieu. We all know what he can do. He's one of the best safeties in the game. He's probably one of the very few safeties in the game that can play anywhere around the field. But you lose Dee Ford, who's your best pass rusher. You lose a veteran in Justin Houston. So I'm not sure who's going to be applying that pressure on the opposing team's quarterback. I think they find themselves in the same place that they were last year, right? So I think Patrick Mahomes and company is going to be, responsible for putting up 30-plus points to win games, as they did similarly last season. So definitely not a good strategy by the Kansas City Chiefs this offseason. I'm very, very shocked that they didn't make more moves to improve that defense, especially considering their defense is the reason why they lost the AFC Championship against the New England Patriots last season. And everyone, that's a wrap. This was the first ever episode for the Unsportsmanlike Conduct podcast. I do appreciate everyone who's listened and tuned in. Until next time, please everyone follow _unsportsmanlike_conduct on Instagram because that's where I'll be posting my podcast episodes.